The criminal actions of road resistance army to the people in the northern Uganda has led to the need to arrest the road resistance army commander Joseph Konny. It's now 9 years. Joseph Konny has never been arrested or produced in any courts of law on the alleged offences he committed. All efforts to bring him to book seem to have failed, but of recent, the International Criminal Court ICC, as per the rules governing it, decided to go with the confirmation of the charges against Joseph Konny. In Konny's absence,
during this period, the ICC has continued seeking the cooperation of all relevant national authorities to arrest and surrender Mr. Konny to the court. Following the prosecution's request to the ICC judges, the pretrial chamber issued a decision on 4 March 2024 to hold a confirmation of charges hearing against Joseph Konny in the suspect's absence, should he not appear before that. Pretrial Chamber 2, in its previous composition, set the date for the hearing to commence on the 15th of October 2024. The Chamber concluded that after a targeted outreach campaign launched by the registry to notify the suspect of the charges against him, all reasonable steps to inform Mr. Konny of the charges against him as set out in the document containing charges have been taken. In this decision, the Chamber determined that Mr. Konny qualifies as a person who cannot be found within the interpretation of Article 61(2)b of the Rome Statute, and that under the prevailing circumstances, there is cause to hold a confirmation hearing against him in his absence. But let me elaborate a little bit on what a confirmation of charges procedure is and what it seeks to achieve. First and foremost, it is not a trial, and the case is still under pre-trial phase proceedings. The confirmation of charges hearing is to determine if sufficient proof exists to start a trial. It is a public preliminary hearing where the judges assess and decide whether or not to confirm all or any of the charges brought by the prosecutor against a suspect, in this case, Mr. Konny.
The charges that await Joseph Konny include war crimes, crimes against humanity, murder, attempted murder, among other offences. Of recent, court issued criteria for any defense lawyer willing to defend Joseph Konny in the trial of confirming the charges against him, which will happen on 5th October 2024 in Hague, Netherlands.
The case can be submitted for trial before other ICC judges if the charges are confirmed. And let me just stress this point. If the case goes to trial, the trial cannot happen in the absence of the defendant, even if the charges are confirmed. Now, on the rights of Mr. Konny, like all other suspects before the ICC, he is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And he is entitled to legal representation when appearing before the court.
The Registrar ICC Zavara Aguilera, however, highlights what will happen after confirming the charges against Joseph Konny.
In case the suspect does not appear before the court, the judges can appoint a lawyer to act on Mr. Konny's behalf. And now my office has commenced the process of identifying and assigning him a lawyer to represent his rights and interests during the scheduled confirmation of charges hearing. Dear members of the media, in closing, I would like to reaffirm the court's unwavering commitment to working with you at local, national, and international levels in promoting our mandate, bringing the court closer to the victims and the international community, and the dissemination of accurate information about the court's proceedings to the victims' communities in Uganda as a whole. And I thank you very much for your kind attention. If you think of it like a filter mechanism to make sure that what goes to trial has sufficient evidence to go to trial. In the confirmation of charges, they look at the warrant of arrest and the charges that have been presented by the prosecutor, and they decide if there are reasonable basis to conclude that some of these charges, all of the charges, can go forward as they are or amended, or not at all. And this is part of the procedural efficiency of the court, so that we know that cases that go to trial have undertaken already some kind of preliminary assessment by the chamber. But it is not a trial. In the ICC, we cannot hold trials in absentia. The statute explicitly says that the trials at the ICC require the presence of the accused person. So the confirmation of charges hearing is not justice in absentia, it is a procedural stage. And it is important because the case, as we know, has 19 years since the warrant of arrest was issued. And it is important to hear some of the witnesses in the confirmation stage. It is important to us to see some of the evidence and to, in a way, allow the opportunity for the chamber and the prosecution to present the case before it goes to trial. If charges are confirmed, there will be no trial unless the suspect appears before the court.
Meanwhile, over 56 million euros is to compensate the victims and the communities that were affected by the criminal actions of the ex-Lord's Resistance Army commander, Dominic Ongwen.
Ladies and gentlemen, as Dominic Ongwen serves his 25-year prison sentence in Norway, you may recall that on February 28, 2024, the judges delivered a reparations order that aims to recognize the harms suffered by victims in respect of the crimes for which Mr. Ongwen was convicted, and help in their healing and rehabilitation. The chamber set the financial liability for Mr. Ongwen at 52.5 million euros and order collective community-based reparations focused on rehabilitation and symbolic or satisfaction measures, consisting of rehabilitation programs and symbolic award of 750 euros for all eligible victims and other community symbolic measures. The chamber declared Mr. Ongwen to be indigent for the purposes of reparations. As a result of this, the Trust Fund for Victims has been encouraged to supplement the reparations award as much as possible and undertake additional fundraising efforts to complement this award. The Trust Fund for Victims has initiated consultations with various stakeholders to prepare the draft implementation plan for the reparations order by the Chamber, which is due to be submitted by 3 September 2024. To develop the implementation plan,
among those to be compensated include 49,722 eligible victims, rehabilitation of victims that will cost 100 million euros and 100 million euro for symbolic measures in the affected communities.
The Trust Fund for Victims is conducting extensive stakeholder consultations with victims, with case location communities like in Abok, Lukodi, Odek, and Pajule, thematic crime victims, especially in relation to sexual and gender-based violence, and former child soldiers, and with local government, with cultural leaders, with religious leaders, with civil society, with the UN, with government officials, and with the diplomatic donor community. Consultations are a participatory program designed process to solicit stakeholder input, recommendations, preferences, and mechanisms for proper design and impactful implementation of the several reparation measures. District officials and local council authorities have been made aware of the Trust Fund for Victims community consultation objectives and schedule. And the Chamber intends that this symbolic payment serves as a stopgap for victims before they can begin benefiting from the rehabilitative community programming modality of the reparation awarded. This amount is to be freely used by each eligible victim as they seem fit. And it represents a symbolic recognition by the judges of the harm suffered by victims. At the same time, the judges recognize that no monetary payment could ever properly compensate for the individual harm suffered. On the question concerning Joseph Konny's, I can categorically tell you that he is not in the custody of the ICC. We are working very hard in cooperation with the states parties of the court, in cooperation with the Ugandan government, to try to secure the arrest and surrender to the ICC of Joseph Konny. And no, we're not cooperating and have not cooperated with any other forces in relation to this operation.
According to the Registrar ICC, the ongoing reparations will kickstart on 30th May 2024 with consultations in communities by Trust Fund for Victims.
The Trust Fund for Victims will also be responsible for raising the funds required to implement the provisions of these reparations programs. The Chamber acknowledged that it would take time before any payments were actually provided to the victims, and that not all victims would receive the symbolic reparation award at the same time. The reparations order is not final. On 22 April 2024, the defense for Mr. Onwen filed its notice for appeal, asking the appeals chamber to suspend the implementation of the reparation order until a judgment on their appeal is issued by the appeals chamber. Now, the appeals chamber will decide, and these are 5 judges that are different, distinct from the trial chamber, and the appeals chamber may uphold the appeal decision, it may amend it, or it may reverse it and remand the matter to the trial chamber for reconsideration. But it is important to bear in mind that appeal proceedings can be lengthy. At this point, we cannot estimate how long the appeals chamber will take to rule on the defense appeal. However, since there is no decision from the appeals chamber yet, all administrative procedures and procedural preparations, as provided in the reparation order, are underway. So we are already implementing the reparation order, unless otherwise instructed by the appeals chamber.
This was communicated during the ICC Registrar's first visit in Uganda since his appointment at the ICC.